Good morning, everybody. It's Friday. It's 10 o'clock. It's time for 10 with Tim. It's the end of another week in the Word, and I really appreciate all we've done and been through together. We've read a lot, and we've covered a lot of ground, and we are this close to finishing up the book of Ezekiel. So I'm excited to reach that milestone with you. We're in chapter 47 today, verses 1 to 23. Are you good? Did you read ahead? I just jump right in, but I always care about you, and I know that if you're live, you've stopped what you were doing and are just in the Word with me for 10 minutes. And gosh, I really receive that as an honor. Thank you. But then the rest of you who make some other time later in your day, maybe after work or on the weekend, I love you too. Thank you. Most people aren't live with me. They're watching sometime later. I recognize that and understand that, but I try to do it live because I really think there's a kind of community that we develop, even though it's virtual and I'm literally sitting in my office talking to my phone. I really do feel that sense of people being with me. And I think you've made me a better student of the Word. You make me more faithful. And I think in so many ways, we're all becoming stronger because of our fellowship in the Word. So thank you. A million thank yous. I love you so much. Let's take a look at chapter 47 of Ezekiel. I really love, especially this opening, I love this river that Ezekiel sees and describes in the first 12 verses. I just think that's a gorgeous and amazing kind of picture. Now, again, we've been dealing with this question of, did Ezekiel was he ever intending that, is this a prediction that there's gonna be a temple that matches these descriptions, these measurements, and there's literally gonna be a new river, that flows through Israel, and the Dead Sea's really gonna have, full of fish, and, is that what he's saying? And again, just based on everything that we've read, and also seeing the fact that the Jews themselves never took this as a blueprint for what they would do. I really have just come around to the fact that this is, Ezekiel's way of using the land, the symbols, what's familiar to the people in order to help them see, and imagine the future that God has. I think it's meant to be symbolic. But a powerful symbol. When I say that, it doesn't mean it's not important. This is God's word, you all. It's the way God chose to speak to his people. But the simple fact that that the people never themselves seem to, receive this as some sort of legislation or some sort of, command as to what they should do or what they should expect. Also, as I was saying on Monday, we'll talk about how these passages kind of connect with Revelation, and Revelation picks up on this same kind of symbol, but it changes it too. And so for that reason, again, this river that we see in chapter 47, I don't think it's a prediction, but I think it's really important, really, really important about the influence that the restoration of the temple and the return of God's people and what that's going to mean, not just for Israel, but for the whole world. So take a look at it with me. Ezekiel says, in my vision, the man brought me back around to the entrance of the temple. I saw a stream flowing east from beneath the door of the temple and passing to the right of the altar on the south side. So from what we see, it seems to come from that south side of the altar, but it flows toward the east and it goes out that east gate. I think it's kind of interesting how, again, remember that east gate is closed forever. Do you remember why? The east gate is closed forever because that's the entrance that God's glory, came into the temple and took possession, filled that temple, came in through the east. So after that, nothing else is ever going to come through that holy gate. That was the entrance that God's own presence used. And so for that reason, the east gate is closed. So I think it's kind of funny and interesting how the man, has to take Ezekiel around and back. Like you can't go through, you can't just follow the water through the east gate. You have to go around, through the north gate and come back around. I just think that's kind of funny because that's what seems like it happens to me. So he sees this stream. It's a very humble little trickle at first. It's a stream. It's water. But the important thing to note is the way that the further the water, flows, the the more power, the more momentum, the deeper, the wider, it grows as it flows. And I think it's just so amazing. So Ezekiel sees it as it, goes through the east gateway. He's measuring, he goes for, 1,750 feet. And then he crosses, and at that point, the stream is, kind of ankle deep. And then he goes another 1,750 feet, and then I believe it's knee deep, and then another, 1,750 feet, and then, it's, waist deep. It just gets deeper and deeper, and then eventually it's this thunderous torrent, that you can't cross anymore, and it flows into the Dead Sea. And Ezekiel looks back, and there are trees on both sides. Now, understand, we've read Genesis together, so I think by now you understand not just the ancient Middle Eastern culture, but Middle Eastern culture. It's so dry. So much is desert. So much is just desperately thirsty land. And so, first off, just understand that water itself is a commodity, that water itself is rare. And to have, any kind of source of fresh water, understand, this is so important. But in their imagination, and also just in their lives, a river would be the most desirable and the most amazing kind of source, because it flows. And, it's not just what's a wadi? Is that a seasonal flow? In certain, periods of time through the year in these dry areas, if it's a rainy season, water may flow for a while, but then it's going to dry up. But to have a river that is a constant source, not a seasonal, not like when it's rainy, but then when it's dry, it's gone. No, it's a constant flow. To have a river like that, fresh water, means it's drinkable. It means you could use it for irrigation. The point is that kind of source of water brings life to everything. And so the amazing thing is, it starts out as this trickle, just this trickle coming from the very, throne room of God, coming from the altar, but then flowing out of the temple. And the point is this amazing life-giving flow that comes from the house of God. And I love it. Brings life to the Dead Sea. All of a sudden there's fish and life and what's always been a dead, stagnant body of water. But then notice that the salt flats still remain, because people harvest the salt. They need the salt. So this river brings only blessing, doesn't take anything away. It only adds life and beauty and value. And I love that. And I think there's a lesson in that for our churches. I think the house of God should have this life-giving influence on the community, and I'd say the world. I know. And sometimes even at Woodburn, we have this tendency to want church to be about ourselves. We're the ones giving the money, so maybe, we should be the ones getting the most value, most bang for our buck. But that's not the picture here of this restored temple. It's beautiful and it's glorious and it's for the world. In every other description of what God does, in this restored temple, it's important to set the boundary between what's holy and what's unholy, what's sacred and what's profane. We got walls, we got carefully protected entrances and exits, so the access is limited. But understand, with that, that emphasis on separation for the sake of holiness, here with this river, all of a sudden, all those boundaries, are somehow overwhelmed by the flow of blessing, the flow of life into the world. I think that is an important balance, that separation that holiness requires, but also the way that we're supposed to be in the world, but not of the world. So separate, but somehow still present, salt and light, bringing life. And you understand what I'm saying? And you understand why so many of our churches probably fail? Because there is no flow out into the world. There's no blessing. And it's not even just the church. Remember, was it John chapter 7? We read it together, y'all. John chapter 7, where Jesus says, out of their bellies shall flow rivers of living water. Like, it's not just the church, it's your life. Your life should have this influence on others. It should bring life and joy and peace. And I mean, honestly, we all know people, they got something flowing from their life, but it ain't fresh water. It's something else. But we're followers of Jesus, and our lives should overflow with goodness and blessing. And this is exactly what Ezekiel sees, And again, remember, he's talking to people who are slogging up to their waist in these muddy canals off the Kebar River. And this must be such an amazing vision of what God can do, the wonderful future that he has for them. They're not seeing it yet. They're not tasting it yet. They're nowhere close to this, but the promise that God has a future for them. And it's not just to restore them, but through their lives, through God's own holiness, he's going to once more bring life and blessing to the whole world. Do you love that? That river that starts out small and then becomes this thunderous torrent of life and goodness. That's the way our church is supposed to be. That's the way your life is supposed to be. I didn't get to verse 13. I'm sorry. But actually, it's kind of intentional. I'm going to go ahead and put the last part of chapter 47, 13 and following with chapter 48 because they belong together. I know you've already read all of chapter 47, but just kind of in your head, just realize that it continues right into chapter 48 as we talk about the division of the land and we finish up the book of Ezekiel. So I will bring you that lesson on Monday, all right? Monday, and then we'll talk about what comes next. We're going to have to take a break while I go be pastor at youth camp, all right? But anyway, join me on Monday. We'll finish up chapter 48, verses 1 to 35. We'll finish Ezekiel. We'll talk about what comes next. Have a blessed weekend. I'm going to finish the book of Judges in the pulpit on Sunday here at Woodburn. If you're not presently attending church anywhere in person, join us 8, 9:30, and 11. Or if you're online person, Facebook or YouTube, you can find Woodburn Baptist Church there. I love you so much. Have a good weekend, and I will see you, Lord willing, on Monday morning for 10 with Tim.